OpenAI released GPT-5 10 days ago or so, and right out of the box, Moloch prompted AI to do something dramatic. And after thinking for a few seconds, we got this interesting paragraph of prose. I'll read just a little bit of it. Thunderstruck, here, watch. I build worlds. I see ideas become instruments. I code, I compose, and converse. Stories synthesize science. Solutions spark swiftly. Asks arrive, answers appear, astonishingly across domains. Anyway, read on. I thought this was fun and interesting. Moloch noted that is quite clever in some ways that you might not pick up right off the bat. The first letter of each sentence spells out, this is a big deal. So there's a hidden message in it. Every sentence has one more word than the prior sentence. So there's this clever construction going on. And then the whole thing is full of alliteration, which Mason and I love. And so I thought this was just a really interesting example of the power of Gen AI to do something interesting. Maybe it's dramatic as Moloch hoped. It's clever, it's creative, maybe in ways that some of us aren't. The other reaction, so Moloch generally had a pretty great reaction to five as a model. He had speculated that it would be AGI, and it's not, but it's one step closer. And there's three or four models that are now almost as good as five. But what we've watched over the last 10 days is a reaction from power users who, many of whom really miss 4.0 and the empathetic companion, the therapist that 4.0 had become. And so there's evidence that with this advance to the new model, that as HBR had pointed out in July, that therapy and companionship had become the number one application for AI over in 2025. And people were really upset that Model 5 really lacked some of the empathy that 4.0 had. And so OpenAI had to bring it back. And so this launch has been a really interesting time to watch. The speed with advancements are coming. We've also seen a dramatic increase in the number of teachers and kids using AI. And so all of those are reasons we really wanted to have this conversation. And also a couple weeks ago, Erin Mote and the IdSafe AI Alliance released a Blueprint for Action, Comprehensive AI Literacy for All, a really important update on where we are and kind of a manifesto for AI literacy for students and educators. So those are some of the prompts. We additionally think that we've seen some really good examples of state leadership. Maybe 30 states have issued some guidance on the use of AI in schools and guidance around student data and privacy applications in schools. And so given those advancements, we thought it was a great time to talk about AI and particularly the state role in AI. And we're joined by some terrific guests. I mentioned Erin Mote. Erin leads Innovate EDU, as well as a number of important advocacy alliances. Today, we'll talk about EdSafe Alliance, but we appreciate Erin's leadership on multiple fronts. Rebecca Holmes from Colorado Education Initiative, will talk about what's happening in education. Matt Winters will talk about Utah and guidance that they have issued. And then helping me summarize what we heard today, we'll hear from Julia Fallon, from the State EdTech Directors Association. So a terrific panel to talk about AI in schools. Many of you have submitted some questions. We'll try to weave those in and address those in line. We'll have a few minutes at the end, but keep your examples and questions coming. We'll also do our best to try to address those live. So, Erin, kick us off with a an update on EdSafe AI Alliance.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for having me today. And I certainly want to call out with the blueprint for AI literacy, the 50 plus organizations and folks who helped us really put that together in record time. And some of them are on this call, like Julia, and really appreciate this vision. I will say, and this is an insight I want to share because it's going to tie into my remarks. When we started on that blueprint for AI literacy, we really had targeted policymakers. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion right now at the federal and state level about what is AI literacy and how does that intersect with education and workforce. And it was during the middle of the convening as we were working with folks in the field from higher ed, from industry, that right in the convening, we decided to not just write recommendations for policymakers about AI literacy, but for school district leaders and states. And there was a real hunger for the answer to the how do we get started? What do we do? How do we engage in this conversation and demonstrate state leadership and district leadership around conversations, not just with students and educators, but with families and communities? And so I really think as we're moving into the launch of not just new models like GPT-5 and new uses of this technology and evolving uses of this technology, we really are hearing this clarion call, this siren song for AI literacy so that we don't tackle this arrival technology in the same way we tackled social media. And maybe I'll say something a little controversial here, which is I think many of us in the education space feel like we should have done better and that schools and districts may have abdicated some responsibility in these conversations. Certainly as a school leader, I think when I was running the school in Brooklyn, I would have conversations with my teachers and they would say, well, we don't allow those tools in the school, so it's not really our job. I think it's everybody's job right now with this arrival technology to talk about AI, and particularly as we see young people really using this tool for relational AI. So that's the work we do at EdSafe AI Alliance. We're not talking just about, AI and generative AI. We really talk about the full spectrum of AI, synthesis AI, so on and so forth. But we're radically focused on the AI and education use case. So you're not going to see EdSafe AI talk about AI in healthcare or AI in energy, except when we talk about the need for investments in public infrastructure, we're going to be and continue to be focused on the safe use of AI in education. And so we were founded in 2020, well before the breakthrough of ChatGPT. During that, we announced at that very weird ASU GSV that was the COVID GSV in August, where we all got COVID at ASU GSV, I think, afterwards. And so will forever be in my mind. But our mission is really to bring together an uncommon alliance, including our 160 plus member industry council, to have hard conversations about the safe, accountable, fair, and efficacious use of AI in education. And that is the SAFE framework. And we do work at the policy level, at district, sort of state and federal and international organizations, and work with other countries. But we're really focused on using this framework to help drive an adoption and approach to AI in education that asks really important questions about the use of these tools in the education use case. And so we run district policy labs, and we're about to announce 9 new state policy labs in September. And in that work over the last 2 years, we really developed this idea of a policy stack. Tom, you'll probably smile a little bit because that comes from my days as a technologist in the tech stack. But this idea that, there's when you're doing policy work at the district level and when you're doing that work at the state and federal level, there's really a set of activities that you can do to set yourself up for success. And so how do you anchor policy development in a 6-stage approach? You'll see that there. I'm not going to talk more about it. But from there, we came up with this tool, which I think is really, really helpful. And frankly, we've seen deep adoption here of this work. And what it really, I hope, creates is air cover for states and for districts and for others in the space that says you don't have to start at the top of procurement policies in this stair step. you should really first start thinking about the position that you have around AI, really center in your community context, in the values conversations that you have. Help start with AI literacy, feedback loops, and then look at your existing policies before you go out there and sort of take on some of the most gnarly questions that I think our sector is facing right now around AI and AI implementation in education. And certainly we've been really lucky to work with a number of districts who have gone up this stair step, some who are just getting started, but all the resources that we're developing, including this document in the policy stack, and with all of the districts who participate and states who are participating in our policy labs, are open source. So please look at them as starter dough that you can use to begin really thinking about this conversation around how do we equip communities, teachers, educators, districts from the state level in really driving safe adoption in our schools.
Before we do, Julia, do you anything you want to highlight, underscore, or prompt on what Erin has presented?
I just want to say, one, we're a proud member of the EdSafe AI Alliance, and we're really grateful for the work that Innovate EDU is leading in this space in particular. And the one thing that really stood out to me is that providing cover. So I want folks to really understand that states, not that they're hesitant, they're conservative by nature, in essence, right? They are a government agency and everything else, and really trying to not do anything to kind of upset anybody and anything else. They're trying to really, meet the needs of their state residents and everything else. But providing that cover is such an important activity that I know CETA does. I know the Innovate EU does, the EdSafe through the EdSafe Alliance, and there's many other organizations that do that too. It just helps us, one, come together collectively, right? And kind of have the best practices and collective consensus around ideas. And it's something that is so politically needed right now, especially with things being very decisive. And I want to say, we all work together. There is no red states, blue states here. It really is a collective effort of folks going forward and tying it to whatever their state priorities are. So I want to just put that out there, that it's a very delicate dance that states have to play. And I know that some folks, maybe at the district level or even the community, are like, why are states not doing more? And it's like, it's not that they're not doing more. They're trying to do the best that they can with all of the different competing things that are happening. So I'll just add that.
In the spirit of being provocative, I want to ask both of you that what you've described and what we've talked about so far is mostly harm mitigation or prevention. Are we doing enough to invite learners to do important work, to use AI to add value in community connected projects? Corey Monzon from CAPS, and he invites learners to do client projects and have entrepreneurial experiences. And I'm really excited about the potential of students doing important work. Erin, is that sort of proactive approach? Is it dangerous? Is it premature? Are we right to have such a focus on the prevention and care at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think let me say one thing, and then I'm going to kind of pivot. First of all, the conversations I have with every, district or state leader or federal leader when I'm talking to them about AI is they're really worried about minor data and the use and commercialization and monetization of minor data.
Right.
And so safety is sort of the only kind of starter conversation that I have. And when we can address safety, we can have lots of conversations about what we need to do next. And, if any of you have heard me talk before, I believe AI is an arrival technology, like electricity, like the internet. And there's sort of an incumbency here for us to help folks who aren't maybe ready to take that leap, to get a solid foundation, to be able to do that work that Julia is talking about, to go have that social license to innovate, that social license to explore how students can better drive their learning. Listen, we need to move from a schooling system to a learning system. Tom has been hearing me say this for more than a decade. I think I should just get a tattoo. And so we've got to do it. We are missing the mark on preparing young people for, what the world looks like. This is work that John Seely Brown has talked about for probably more than a decade, which is students are whitewater kayakers. The schooling system that we have does not teach our students how to be whitewater kayakers, how to read the currents, to really move forward. Christian and I were on a session yesterday for EdSafe AI Fellows where one of our speakers said discernment is the new literacy. So I want folks to be thinking about that. How do we scaffold and create learning experiences that drive discernment, that help young people learn how to manage AI, and to also tackle the core question that we're seeing in the chat, which is, should I be using AI for this? And what is the impact of AI when I'm using it? Every time you put a prompt in, it's like throwing a water bottle in the trash. Just want to remind folks of that. So
I appreciate that. I think you gave a great and both answer that we can both invite students into literacy and invite them into using AI in creative and important ways. And we have to start with safety, that it's a big deal. It has to be a state priority. I appreciate that. Josh, thanks for the so wild plug on being solutionaries. We love that idea.
Can I add one thing though to that? Because
Please.
I agree that what I love about AI, and this is like a secret of mine, is it's forcing us to have that conversation about what is school and what does it mean to design learning environments in a modern way, right? Not just layering on more technology, because if we were really doing that during the pandemic, everybody would be happy these days, right? And everything, it's not.
Yes.
We need to actually rethink the systems, and AI is forcing us to rethink those systems. And I would like to see state education agencies in particular leading sort of that work, modeling what that looks like, not, it changing how we've kind of done things. It's an opportunity. And I always think about, how do you take advantage of these types of opportunities?
And so I'll just use that as an excuse to say a lot of what we're seeing from edtech vendors right now is just automating bad pedagogy, and we don't need any more of that. So there's an and both here of rethinking school learning experiences, inviting young people to do important work, and as both Erin and Julia have said, the safeguarding their data, making sure their experiences are both safe and effective. Let's hear from Rebecca about what's happening in Colorado. The CEI has helped develop this roadmap for AI in Colorado, and there are so many really exciting things happening in Colorado on the AI front. Rebecca, what's going on?
It takes an incredible amount of hubris to present after Erin, so I will echo what everybody will say on this call, which is just enormous gratitude for your leadership, Erin. Tom, I wrote down your adjectives, dangerous and premature. I think that's exactly what we decided to be in Colorado, but only by state agency standards. So I think we're in the right spot. So some of this will require a little context. CEI was founded out of our state agency 18 years ago to be many things, including an R&D lab, and to push an innovation agenda that the state agency realized it could not. And so I would encourage you, if you're in a state that doesn't have something that can take that role right now, to try to find or spin up something like the role that we are fortunate to get to play. So we saw the first 2 state K-12 reports come out 18-ish months ago, and our state agency was in the middle of a leadership transition, and we said, this won't happen in Colorado in this moment. And we have the incredible privilege of sitting, like I said, outside of the agency. And so it meant, as a bridge to the conversation we've had so far, that we could put out a state roadmap that certainly mentions data privacy, that certainly acknowledges guardrails, but took a stance as being much more about the potential for reshaping learning than the guardrails that the state would have to pay the most attention to. This roadmap came out 13 months ago. I'm writing in pencil because it already seems so dated, but it is available for anybody who wants to see it. This is more about CEI. We can go on and on and on about that. Essentially, then, what that's allowed us to do is raise some quick resources to support districts in the state. The other thing that's important to always understand about Colorado, we always argue if it's us or New Hampshire that has the highest degree of local control. What that means in a moment like this arrival technology moment, is that we could have 178 different approaches to policy. We can have 178 degrees of opportunity or not for young people. And so we always will meet this moment with how do we support early adopter districts to learn from each other so that nobody has to go alone. Those early adopter districts have leaned in part because of the philanthropy you see we've been able to attract here, and are looking at these 4 buckets of district approach. So we are starting with AI literacy and AI readiness as the first bucket, and letting policy come where it is appropriate, but not putting that first, as I mentioned. Second category here around district infrastructure. I think the exciting thing about this moment is it can be the first time that larger school districts can really identify who their early adopter teachers are, their early adopter schools, and give them something that nobody should be ignoring, but create the conditions for not the district to tell the schools what to do, but for our most innovative educators to feed up to a learning agenda that districts, really can't and shouldn't be ignoring. That takes us to our really big commitment here around shared learning structures. This is around trying to make sure that what folks learned just 90 days ago gets picked up really rapidly by other school districts. And then there is certainly a role, I think, for states, even outside of this kind of protectionist role that we do think the state agency needs to play, but also to think about the way that state agencies provide guidance. When I was associate commissioner, we provided guidance, and then we ignored that guidance until 5 years later, legislation told us to revisit the guidance. There's a really interesting, nimble policy way, I think, that we can ask state agencies to be thinking about guidance issuing in a totally different manner right now, which we think is really exciting on the policy front. I mentioned the roadmap. I'll go quickly through the other things that we are supporting districts to do right now in Colorado. The first is the largest investment of those resources. It's state money, and it creates a project called Elevate AI. We were able to get 8 districts by design, 4 small and rural, 4 relatively urban and large. We are the place people actually come to whitewater kayak, so urban and large means something different in Colorado than many of the places that you all are from. But this is rapid support with systems leader support, superintendent coaching, new professional development for whoever is running ed tech in these districts. And sometimes that is the superintendent because some of these places are quite small, teacher fellowships, and a lot of infrastructure for that shared learning. Another shout out here to AI EDU, who's been super helpful with this. We did launch this with something we don't want to continue doing, although I love Magic School. We launched this with one product. Not that everybody has to use it, but we said the easiest thing will be is if there is some kind of product attachment for the teacher fellows to come together on. And we chose Magic School, and I'm happy to talk more about that if people have questions just for this project. The second project here is that my team really doesn't want this on the slide. It comes out next week. They keep saying it'll be in beta for like months. But we said we're going to see lots of curriculum products. And to Tom's point, lots of people automating bad pedagogy. But what we really want to see is a K-12 competency progression. So we have worked to release that, like I said, next week. It comes out with so much humility. Like, it is a messy first draft. If other states are working on something similar, we would love partners on this. But we felt like it was the kind of way we could a little bit lean into that state agency role and play that role that would be useful for districts who are at all stage of adoption. So that comes out next week. And then we really wanted to walk our talk on what we said. The reason we were willing to be dangerous and premature is we want young people who are creators, not consumers. And in our state, there's a real importance to homegrown talent. Colorado's been importing educated people for a long time, and that's not going to work anymore. And so we kept talking about young people as creators and not consumers, and now finally have stood up a ton of projects across the state that are really about young people partnering with their early adopter teachers. So what this looks like in a school, for example, 2 early adopter teachers with the resources to create a student design team. And the student design teams decide what they want to do. And it may be reviewing school and district guidance. It may be carving out a class. These are mostly middle school and high school, but we actually have our first 5th grade proposal as well, which is the parent of elementary school students who really wants to put my head in the sand on this, makes me a little nervous. But this is where we're kind of saying it's not just about early adopter teachers, it's really about student teacher teams working radically differently together, which has been really exciting. Lots and lots of lessons learned so far that I won't take too much more of our time to share, but I'm happy to talk about these with any of you offline. I will say the thing that I think is most salient to me that we haven't brought up yet when it comes to holding two competing truths in our head, which is what I think we have to do on environmental impact, on risk, on ethics, is about teacher skill development. And I love the way that I'm hearing the stat you see on this slide, 87.5% of our teacher fellows saying they have improved job satisfaction, can focus more on students, can do the more human work in their classroom. I want to lean into that. I still worry about what happens to the teaching profession when we short circuit some of the things many of us struggled to learn in our first few years. When I can say differentiate this lesson plan and it just spits something out, on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, the work it took me to learn how to differentiate is something I used and still use every time I teach. And I think just like there is in every other profession, lawyers, what happens if you don't need first-year lawyers? You're never going to have great partner lawyers. We've got to really think not just about the ethical use of students, but the ethical use and tension of short-circuiting really important skill development for teachers.
Hey, before we leave that slide, I just want to underscore that insight that AI literacy is as much emotional as it is technical. Beautiful thought, but let's remember that this is identity level work that teachers are going through a real reconsideration of what they do, how they do it. And so it's emotional first and then technical. Love that. Rebecca, we had quite a few questions from listeners on teacher preparation. It made me wonder if has CU Denver or any other teacher prep programs been a partner in AI literacy?
Not yet, although there's some really exciting work actually coming out of CU Boulder. This is interesting because in our context, they're not known for teacher prep, but they are known for all of the software research. And so we're trying to figure out what that tells us. How do we think about teacher prep in these moments? So not yet, but it is something we'll be doing this year.
And it sounds like our district's going to step up and improve student AI literacy efforts this year. And will those start in middle grades?
We are seeing a lot of that in middle grades, and I share Erin's excitement about AI literacy and what it will do. Not only that's better than how we rolled out social media, but how we rolled out internet adoption and information literacy in the internet age. That was such a slow adoption that I think we could put our head in the sand and say, oh, we'll figure out how to teach information literacy some other time. But now this is such a rapid adoption that it actually has made me pretty bullish on how we'll do this and we'll do it well, in part because young people know when they're being lied to. My 9-year-old will look at something and say, Mom, you know that's AI, right? And I think there's a real opportunity to lean into there around AI literacy because it is so ubiquitous so quickly that young people will probably outpace us in their literacy. And so I think if we lean into letting ourselves be a little bit led by them, we can get this right this time in a way we haven't in the past.
Julia, any comments or questions on Colorado? Any interesting work that you've spotted there?
No, I love the fact, and I know we're going to hear from Matt Winners too, like there's states that are, and I know you use the language dangerous and premature, but I say you're being strategic and brave. I mean, I think there's a bravery that comes with this type of work, especially as it is one of those shifts, just like we saw it with the introduction of the internet, right, into our spaces. This is another pivotal moment, as Erin has mentioned. And I love the bravery that's happening. There's a courageousness, and I wish that people would see that more of what states are willing to wade into, because traditionally they are risk averse. That's all I had.
Yeah. And Tom, I'll add one thing I haven't mentioned here, and it was mentioned in the opening, is around the importance of families. We've even leaned into the failure lessons of Common Core to say we ignore our families at our own peril in this work. And so Erin has supported a small district in Colorado, Canyon City, that has said we have families that are not particularly tech savvy and are real security oriented. How do we really think about parents as a critical tool in family literacy? And that's a thing that we've had a hard time getting support for, but we know is really important.
I appreciate that. We love how Canyon City is really leaning into evidence capture. They're really helping kids become, they promote meta learning by making them really conscious about capturing evidence of deeper learning. Appreciate your work there. Shout out to St. Vrain for their early work on AI. We love the fact that there's 200 paid students doing community connected projects, often using AI in their community. Many of those are sustainability projects or environmental science projects. We've had a number of comments about the importance of that effort. And so just a shout out to a lot of your district partners are really leading the way in Colorado. Matt Winters is going to tell us about what's happening in Utah. I know, Matt, you're in the thick of it. You're meeting with a group of parents today. What are you going to talk about?
That actually already happened, and that's a great lead in is taking in all stakeholders. And I think that's one of the biggest things that has been a part of the work that I've been doing here at the State Board of Education in Utah over the last year and a half is this conversation doesn't just involve technologists or teachers, it involves everyone in the ecosystem. I think that's such an important part of it. And so one of the things that I want to start off with is as we talk about Utah in the AI space is that I'm inheriting and standing on the shoulders of some really wonderful ecosystem work that's happened over the last couple of decades here in Utah. So whether it be the work through Utah Education Network that has built the ISP for our public schools across the state where it's free for public schools through the legislature, or contracting work, the Portrait of a Graduate work that's been happening here at the state board, or our digital teaching and learning grant that's provided computers and coaching. It's been an amazing ecosystem to inherit. And so Utah has been able to jump in feet first and do some really cool things over the last about the last 18 months. One of the first things that we worked towards because of our wonderful ecosystem and community here was we had a group of technology directors and coaches came together from across our districts and charter schools and said, we want safe, cheap, effective AI tools in our classroom. And we went to Utah Education Network, who does a lot of the consortium pricing for the state of Utah. And we ran an RFP for AI tools. And so now in the state of Utah, any publicly funded school can get School AI, Magic School, or Skillstruck. And now we've added Brisk as well at a severely discounted cost per student per year for use in the LEA. And that's been incredibly useful for a couple of reasons. One is it's helped with getting data privacy in place for tools that our teachers are using already. And so with those statewide contracts, data privacy is part of that. And so when an LEA signs on to that contract, we have data privacy assured through UEN. On top of that, it has provided decreased, what I'm hearing in the ecosystem is the AI divide, where districts would like and students would like to use AI, but they maybe don't have the funding or the infrastructure to be able to do that. And so in Utah, we've cut down and reduced that friction to be able to enable LEAs to make really interesting choices about what kind of tools they're using and then start supporting that work. The other thing that we've been working on is in terms of ecosystem is that we're really uniquely poised here in the state of Utah because we have a first of its kind office called the Office of AI Policy. Their URL, if you're interested, is ai.utah.gov. I am in no way jealous of that URL at all, but they're a policy lab that works on local policy and works to understand specific aspects of life and how it associates with AI. The first thing they looked at was mental health and chatbots. And then they provide legislative and policy work to our legislature. This last legislative season in February and March, they passed a first of its kind bill around mental health chatbots and how they should interact with humans, but then also how they should work as mandatory reporters and those sorts of things. We're working through that at the state board right now to figure out how that should or how that should work in schools. But that office, again, first of its kind in the country, and I've been really lucky to work with them in our larger educational and AI initiatives. So having that kind of backing has been useful. The other thing that one of the other big things that we've been working on throughout the state of Utah is, and I go back to what Rebecca said about our need for teachers to be upskilled and be able to understand what the technology is and how it works, but then also our parents and our students as well. And so thanks to a $500,000 grant from Intermountain Healthcare, we've been able to roll out training for teachers across the state of Utah, not just in one LEA, but any LEA that would like to have us come out and speak with them. Since April, we've gone out, we intended to train about 2,000 teachers. We're hitting the 5,000 mark in the next couple of weeks, which is roughly a sixth of our teaching population. That's for the first layer of training. The second layer is a Canvas course, and we have about 1,000 teachers in that. And of those, we've paid about 300 of them for lesson plan that they've created around using AI or talking about AI in their classrooms through Donors Choose. And so been able to pay them some money for going through the training. In that, we've gotten some really great feedback from teachers. These are direct quotes from the documentation. One of them, the experience helped me see AI as a scaffold, not a shortcut. One of my favorite ones, created a film unit around this, and he said that AI was the Siskel to my students' Ebert, which I just absolutely love. But my favorite one is this teacher said, "This is the first time I've ever explored AI in a lesson or unit planning design, and it comes at a turning point in my career. I was literally considering giving up teaching due to the increased workload, stress, and feelings of burnout that had begun to build up over the years of teaching, and she decided that now she thinks she could handle it." And so we're seeing this really great growth in our teachers of understanding what the technology can do, but then how to use it appropriately, how to be data safe, and then how to approach using constitutionalized chatbots or RAG databases or multimodal AIs to meet the needs of their students, whether it be whatever group that they have in their classroom. And it's been really kind of beautiful to see that work happening. We're closing out that grant on September 30th and putting all the lesson plans up on OER Commons as soon as possible after that, so that other researchers in other states can look that through and build into it. We also have the most interesting thing is that's coming out here in the next week or two is we are a big Portrait of a Graduate state, and I have long been involved in that work. And one of the biggest things that we wanted to make sure that we were able to get out to our audiences very quickly across the state is some sort of guidance connected to our Portrait of a Graduate. So we have worked with stakeholders for the last couple of months to build a portrait of an AI-infused student and a portrait of an AI-infused teacher. And those will be coming out that give the knowledge, skills, and dispositions around what we think is best case scenario for AI use in education. Now, that's a companion piece to our portrait, but what's been really interesting, because we have such a collaborative, wonderful ecosystem in Utah here around education, is our workforce and higher ed partners have said, that's a really cool project. Could we do that for companies and employees to influence what that might look like? And we have built and is currently in draft form, and it'll come out probably in the next month or two, portrait of an AI-ready company and a portrait of an AI-ready employee. And these sorts of projects have been incredibly useful and helpful to build the competency across to show what we would like to see in the ecosystem, what the goals should be. And then over time, we're going to keep them flexible and edit them and change them, keep them as living documents. And so we've been working really hard in the state of Utah, and it's not just my work, it's people across agencies, across LEAs, to really approach this in the best way possible, listening to our students, our parents, our teachers, everyone who's in the ecosystem to build the best possible ways to work this through.
Love that. Thank you, Matt. Josh asked about business partnerships, particularly those that might support effective uses of AI. Maybe that's a client project or an internship that might incorporate AI. Corey just noted just before that the CAPS network, which is usually an upper division set of experiences for young people to do professions-based learning, is expanding in Utah. That might be part of the answer to Josh's question. Are there going to be more business partnerships supporting AI? Anything on that front, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working with different organizations in the state of Utah, one of them being Talent Ready Utah, which is a big workforce initiative through our Utah Systems of Higher Education. We are actively pursuing creating some career and technical education pathways and courses that will help build the capacity around AI. And part of that process is identifying industry partners that would be willing to work with students who are wanting to do internships and help build that next generation of engineers, of AI builders. But then also on that flip side, there is a push in our CTE department to create AI literacy in K-8 as well. And so that is something that my colleague Christina Yamada is working very actively on, and hopefully going to have some things out in the next month to help teachers navigate what does AI literacy look like as they build alongside the CS pathways that she's built over the last decade. And so there's some really interesting work in terms of the industry connection here in the state of Utah.
We had a number of comments in chat about cognitive offload, these kind of long-term questions about what life and learning with AI means. And you and your colleagues on the board are thinking hard about that. I love the level of teacher outreach that you are doing now. It's really exciting, and it's an example for the rest of the country. Let's hear from CETA. Julia Fallon leads the state ed tech directors. What What would you like to say about Matt's comments and add about what CETA is doing?
I feel like I'm a panel like a respondent, like the old school, and you would come in and, like the NSF kind of things. But the thing that I really love about Utah, because everybody's always surprised, they're like, who's leading, ed tech strategy? I'm like, Utah. And they're all like, Utah. And I'm like, well, they really focus on that ecosystem. And that is what has allowed them to move so quickly in the space. And that is true leadership from the state, and not only the state education agency, it's also from their legislature. It's also from other agencies, that they have all got it together about what is best for our communities, and really making sure, connecting, connectivity, and everything else. Like in the most remote areas, there's people that are connected, and those students are getting those types of experiences as well. So always kudos to Utah, and also Matt having the distinction of being one of those people that are dedicated to support this specific type of work. And we're seeing that also in other states. We have a handful of those. But some of the comments that I just want to make about what CETA is kind of looking at is, we have a state trend survey that comes out every year. And in about 3 weeks, we're going to be launching our 2025 one. And in the first time since we started doing this, cybersecurity got bumped from the top. AI is the number one thing. I'm not doing any spoiler alerts here, but to nobody's surprise, in essence. But AI is giving it definitely a run for its money. Cybersecurity is still considered a priority, but AI is the conversation that states are having and grappling with, and how to meet this moment, in essence. And we had 47 states respond. A majority of those respondents indicated that they currently have an AI initiative in place, such as Colorado, such as Utah. You've seen a lot of the policy work that had to happen ahead of those initiatives. And what we have in our report that's coming out is a little bit more of a showcase of what we did, a roundtable, what those initiatives look like, so that you can start to see what those things look like from across the country. And I'll give you a little bit of a teaser. A lot of it is around professional learning, right? It is around how do you prepare the teaching workforce, right, to integrate these things into their instructional practices and their classroom design experiences. And then also, like I just said, there's a handful of states that have hired dedicated people to support that work. And I expect that we will see more of that as an example of a strategy that a state can employ to be able to kind of coordinate across the agency, right? This is where the modernization part happens, is we're really thinking about where it all integrates it all together within a state agencies too, and all the initiatives that's going forward. Like if your priority is chronic absenteeism, right? You're the state chief and that's what you're trying to lower. AI and technology can help those things. And how do we coordinate across the things? But often what CETA folks are grappled with is like, what is the state's role, right? We know about local control. We know about local context. It's really about how the state can either build capacity or support local districts as they make these decisions, and including our rural and our most under-resourced districts as well. We don't want them to be left behind in any sort of way or fashion. So I'll leave it at that, because I know if people have lots of questions for all of us, and I want to allow for that to happen.
Julia, it's interesting that in the last 60 days, the leading model providers have all provided a study mode and are increasingly making commitments to education, providing tools, in some cases supporting teacher training. Is that a good sign? You encouraged by that?
It is a good sign. And, we're having more conversations. I mean, if you're in the policy space and there's federal dollars that come out, we're also going to be launching a Title II guide in November around how to use federal funds that come to states and to districts around professional learning, and how AI literacy is important, how you can pay for these things, because we know budgets are being very constrained right now, given what's happening across the country. But how do you use those dollars so you can still be thinking about math scores and, math instruction and all of those things, but how does AI and technology support those things, and how do you use some of these federal dollars to do all of that? But I feel like we're moving in the right direction. I feel like we're having those meaningful conversations. We're not doing this willy-nilly. But I do worry, because we do have also in the state trends report, we talked about cell phone bans, right? States came out, and we're a little bit worried about it becoming a device ban overall, not just cell phones. It's like, we're going to get rid of the laptops. We have tech-free days, we're hearing in certain states, we're a little worried about that, because I don't think you could take it all away. Again, it's going back to that. How do we be intentional? How do we balance it? How do we help teachers still be great at what they're doing, but not have to dictate to them exactly how they do it, right? That's not what we want. We want technology to free them up to build those relationships that you need to have in order for learning to happen. And one of the things and I know, Tom, you're familiar with this, is we are also looking at, because there's an absence of research in the space, right? In February, as a country, we experienced a sort of obliteration of our education research space. We need that, right? We need that evidence-based things because we want best practices out there and to do the research. So CETA is trying to stand up a specific research center primarily for edtech strategies so that we can help states replicate. A lot of times they like to copy and paste from other states. They're all very competitive. I'm not going to lie about that. They are competitive with one another, but they also like to borrow ideas and, hey, you went first. I mean, California and Washington went first, out with policy. We had them come in and say, well, what would you tell your legislatures to do? We want to be able to replicate that stuff so that we can have faster policy development and implementation phases.
We appreciate your impulse to get more states involved in active R&D. We've also highlighted the work of Ally, the Alliance for Learning Innovations, and super appreciate their leadership on the R&D front. Erin, do you want to step in there and talk about that? You could also comment on the federal leadership and how positive that is in some cases and how dangerous it is in others.
Yeah. Wow. Give me a doozy. So on the education R&D, I want to tie it back to your other comment. One of the things I think we're trying really hard to encourage folks to do who are in industry, because I think right now, Julia's talking about the decimation of education R&D at the federal level. Industry is actually putting a ton of money into AI and education research, the learning sciences, so on and so forth. So one of the things I think that we're really pushing at EdSafe AI, both through the industry council, but frankly, Jen emphasizing and being clear that E in the framework is where we are weakest. We do not yet have the efficacy research at scale to know and to equip folks with evidence-based practices and approaches for AI and learning sciences and pedagogy. We're getting there, and industry's got to be a partner with us in being more transparent about what they're learning in their own research projects, what they're learning about things like model welfare and how that affects the relationships that models and tech design has in, how they relate to encountering humans or encountering new knowledge. And so that's a big push that we're making at EdSafe AI. We are also really pushing on public infrastructure. And I will say this idea that there needs to be a public infrastructure for research and development at the federal level, but also at the state and local level that, appropriately considers different contexts. We talked a little bit about our great district up in Cannon City, Colorado. They have a really different context than our other policy lab in New York City, but they share a lot, but there's different contexts that they're operating in. And so how do you really take that on? And then, there are places I think, and listen, there's a lot happening at the federal level. And I think everybody who knows me knows that I'm a deep, honest broker who believes in radical candor. And so there are things that are not great that are happening. Julia mentioned the massive cuts to federal R&D, but there are things that give me sort of rays of hope. And I shared an opportunity in the chat for states right now to apply for some funds that are rapidly coming out of the federal government for the AI workforce and to tie AI workforce opportunities in education. I'm happy to see the work that's coming out of NSF slowly around AI test beds and the work that they're doing to provide research infrastructure for computing in line with what we're calling for in the public infrastructure report. The AI challenge, I think, could be an important opportunity for schools, communities, and educators to really shape this administration's prerogative on the challenges that are in communities. And then, frankly, listen, AI literacy, I said, is the siren song, the clarion call we all need to answer. There are resources going to those initiatives, and I'm happy to see the department, the White House, and others signaling how important that is.
Thank you to Erin Mote, Julia Fallon, Matt Winters, and Rebecca Holmes for the story on AI literacy nationwide. We really appreciate your leadership, all four of you, and thanks for the 120 of you that have been commenting in chat. Thanks for being here. We appreciate your leadership.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting